We are pleased to have Jim MacLennan, and he's the Vice President of Digital Advisory. We just heard that he's north of Chicago dealing with some thunderstorms, etc. Clearly, Jim has the topic is sustainability, innovation, and digital transformation. So obviously, we're continuing on sort of a trend in this conversation today, which will add to what we've been hearing already. And, I think Jim has a lot of experience across multiple industries that you can see on the bio. And, it sounds like he's presenting kind of a simple framework for understanding what this means. So with that, Jim, I want to thank you for being with us today, and I will turn it over to you.
Thanks very much. Let's see, as I'm setting my screen up, I will note, do this right. I know that I noticed by the agenda that, where do I say yes? Please share. Excellent. I noticed by the agenda that I'm, before lunch, and a classic speaker rap is to say, I'm the only thing that's standing between you and your lunch. But that's not the case. The truth is, you're the only thing standing between me and my lunch. So I'm going to get this thing going. It should actually fill out the time. I think we're going to have a great panel discussion, and it should be fun and cool to talk about. And before I get into the details of the presentation, I need to say a word about buzzwords. Buzzwords, people have a love-hate with buzzwords sometimes. They're overused, but I think they're a very handy shorthand. They're like the Lego blocks of communication. If a buzzword is used correctly, it is actually just a nice distillation of an idea that you don't necessarily have to get into the details of that idea to start having a richer conversation about other topics. And I'm defending the use of buzzwords because this presentation is 100% buzzword compliant. I've got almost every buzzword from the past 10 years in this presentation. I'm going to go through it right now. This is the agenda of the presentation, and it's kind of a past, present, and future. All right. So starting about 2017, we were learning about digital transformation and what's important to me, this idea of understanding how value is created in business, because that's how you can make change happen if you understand the value creation that is important to any organization. And then we get to what I call the present. We're kind of coming to the end of the present. I guess we always are coming to the end of the present. How COVID had a major impact, and we learned an awful lot about the resilience of business. And there was a ton of innovation actually forced upon us because of a significant event. And those significant events continue. And so when I think about the future, I think about two ideas. This idea of resilience, trying to allow your company or enable your company to live to see another day, and sustainability, which is how do I enable my company to live forever? And so that's the kind of stuff that we're going to be talking about today. It sounds like an awful lot. And yeah, we have somewhere between 45 and an hour of time to talk about this. And I have a million slides, actually about 70, but that's just I speak in pictures. But no worries, because at the end of the presentation, I'm going to simmer this thing down to 5 simple ideas. 5 simple ideas that you can bring back to your organizations and continue this conversation there. So let's dive in to the first topic, and I'm going back to the past and learning about this thing called digital transformation, a classic buzzword. So good it takes 2 words to say it. I think it's 8 syllables. It's huge. It barely fits on the slide. It's not really that old of a buzzword. Go to Google search and say, what's the history of people looking on the internet for what does digital transformation mean? And it's not really registering as late as 2013. It starts to take off around 2016 and then sort of hits a peak. Now in this presentation, all my little graphs are going to be ending on December 31st, 2019 for a very specific reason. But digital transformation, you can see growing, and people are still looking for a way to describe what digital transformation is. And actually, I have a very simple way to describe digital transformation and how an organization can understand what are the components of a successful digital business. And it's only 5 components. The first 3 are the things that you would expect. Systems and processes designed to automate internal operations, to get you closer to your customer. And then finally, information becoming part of the products and services that you sell. I mean, that to me, the advent of the Internet of Things and adding information to our products became the trigger for people understanding I can holistically understand a company digitally now. It's what we make, who we sell it to, and how we fulfill. And so those are the first 3 components. The next component, the 4th component, is one you probably expect. It's the data, but I'm not talking about just integrating data between all these different systems. I'm talking about, does your organization have the tools and the skills to get information out of that data, information to make good business decisions? And then the 5th component of a successful digital business, this is the one I think people don't expect. The 5th component of a successful digital business is your team, the people inside the company that talk with your customers, that make and ship the products and that fulfill the orders in the back. These are the folks that they have the domain knowledge, they have the understanding of what it takes to create value, and they have the understanding of how we can apply digital to make things work well. And you can't just throw technology at this. Technology is usually the later in the conversation before understanding this stuff. And this is a very simple framework to understand digital transformation. So now when you start looking at very specific ideas, somebody comes to you and says, I want to talk about e-commerce. I want to talk about pricing optimization. I want to talk about quality on the shop floor and metrics and measurements and integrating it to my customer experience. I can now put those specific ideas in that context of where it fits, how do I prioritize it, and who in the organization, because they all need to talk together, who in the organization and what other digital processes do we have to make sure are connected in that conversation. And through this presentation, I'm throwing these like blue ribbons up there because I'm trying to pull where quality and the idea of applying quality sort of very pointedly falls in all of these things. So digital transformation, yeah, it's a buzzword, but quite frankly, it's simply put, it's all about how your organization creates the value that it wants to create. But that actually begs a question. It's a little bit out of order. The real question is, like, why are we doing any of this? What value are we creating? And a lot of people consider the concept of value creation, because it sounds a little wispy, a couple extra syllables in there, to be a bit of a buzzword. And when I do projects and work with, back in my corporate days or with my customers now, I hear mostly that people understand value to mean ROI, dollars and cents. And lo and behold, it's very difficult for a lot of digital transformation style projects to land, to get started, to get resources, because there's no hard dollar ROI. What I maintain there is you have to broaden your understanding of the kinds of value that a company creates to get those other things to happen. So when you talk to organizations, when you talk to your organization about how we create value, this is not a situation where I would come in and say, here's a bunch of brand new ways to create value. No, it's the exact opposite. I want to understand in your words how you create value, because companies do this all the time. And the way to drill into this is by understanding the different stakeholders. So there's 4 main stakeholders that you can talk about: owners, and here owners, employees, partners, and the community. Owners are where all the financial metrics will come from. Oversimplified and distilled down into something called total shareholder value. Yeah, it sounds like something that only applies to public companies, but TSR absolutely can apply to private companies, private equity. There's always some sort of return, and it's always of those 3 components: earnings growth, what you make, capital efficiency, how you use that money, and multiple expansion, or what the market thinks of that. Employees are very important too. Remember, team, that's the most important part of a digital transformation, and a typical measurement for that is this thing called employee engagement. It's been around for about 10 years or so, and it's a way to understand, how employees are engaged and believing in the company. For partners, and I'm talking about the entire value chain, supply chain, suppliers, internal distribution, if you have distribution, all the way out to your customers and your customer's customer. Lots of metrics there that people absolutely buy, that they're valuable, that you want to start creating value with. And then there's community and how you interact with the outside world. And that's the CSR stuff, corporate social responsibility. Now, each one of these high-level ideas you can break down into some detail. And then when you look at these different charts, the farther you get to the right, you start recognizing metrics that, oh, yes, we do talk about, pricing. We do talk about cost of goods sold. That's something that we're used to talking about. Yes, exactly. That's the kind of value that you care about for projects. This chart shows how to pull it back to that high level value that, typical owners or investors or the board really care about. Again, TSR, 3 simple components: how much money you make, what you do with the money you make, and then what the market thinks of you. And you can apply any of these things. Actually, there's a bunch of these things that quality actually applies to. Quality and quality practices can drive the returns in all of these different areas. I like to call this kind of quality the quality of your results, as well as the quality of the work you're actually doing on the floor. For employees, it's a little bit different. Like I said, it's more this concept of employee engagement. A lot of companies have been doing employee engagement. It's a 1 to 100 type summary metric of 3 really simple ideas. Do you understand the direction and the purpose of the company? Do you understand and actually buy into what we're trying to do with this organization? And do you have the support from upper management? I mean, I'm not talking about upper management. Actually, do you have the support from your direct manager? Do you get the feedback that you need to do your best? And then finally, are you set up for that success? Do you have the tools and the techniques that you need to do your best every single day? And each one of these things can be blown out into very specific things that you could take an overall employee engagement survey, or you can drill into these things and put work around it and say different projects or different change actually drive these different things. All of these elements roll up into this idea called employee engagement. And many of these elements absolutely can be impacted and made better by the correct application of quality principles. So I call this kind of quality of trust. It's because it's in a sense, is that relationship between the organization and the team that actually makes it happen. Value chain or value for your partners. This is a lot more things that people may see. Yes, we've been doing these kind of metrics for a long time, but these are the kind of metrics when people don't want to put dollars and cents against them, they'll still say, oh, I'm going to increase my transaction efficiency. I'm going to get my customer satisfaction scores up. If they don't want to relate it specifically to an increase in revenue, say, then they will say, well, customers will do better. And if they can get executive management to buy off on something like that, then Katie, bar the door, you're good to go. And same thing here. There's a number of different areas that quality can apply. And in this area, I actually think because you're talking about your relationships with your suppliers and your relationships with your distribution and all the way out to the customer, it's really quality of experience. There's a huge area here that's digital transformation friendly, because you want to get into the experience of what it's like to do business with us. And so there's a lot of opportunity to apply those ideas and define value in this way. And finally, some companies absolutely prioritize this idea of another stakeholder being the community and really understanding not just what happens inside your four walls, but what happens outside the four walls, because you're trying to sell to those folks, because you're trying to be a good citizen inside that community, because you're trying to hire people and you want people to understand what's going on. And it's even easy it's straightforward to apply ideas of quality around this as well. And again, this is one of the things I would call quality of trust. In the end, you need to get specific about value creation and understanding, kind of what is the value that gets created, because we're all talking about the prioritization and investment of scarce resources. And I'm not just talking about money. I'm primarily talking about time and attention. And when a given activity can actually drive the value that the company, your organization cares about, then you can get that most precious of resources, time and attention. So yes, value creation sounds like a buzzword, but really simply put, understanding value is really understanding how to get to the why. Why are we doing this? And if you don't understand or if your organization doesn't understand the why, they'll never get to the how or the what. So, kind of a dense section. That's the end of the past. But what I do want to, sort of, if I could, give you one idea to take home, it's this idea of finding simplicity. Frameworks that are, simple, elegant, but not too complicated, easy to draw, easy to remember, easy to lead the conversation. Those frameworks will reduce the complexity of the communication. When you drill in, yes, there's got a lot of work to be done, but frameworks actually help you communicate this complexity a lot better. Brings us to the present. And again, this is about 2020, and I'm going to talk about COVID here, but it's pretty much taking us, I'll say, to the end of this year. And it's not really much of a buzzword. This is almost like an assumption. There's certain parts of life that are predictable. And when things aren't predictable, then interesting things seem to happen. So an interesting exercise to go through would be, how predictable has the last couple of years been? And so now I'm going to go back to Google and back to, what people were looking for and searching for back in the 2020 timeframe. Now, the three lines here are transformation, but also COVID and Spanish flu. If you remember, in the beginning of COVID, it was being compared to the Spanish flu. And so I thought, well, that's interesting. Were we expecting this at all? And if you look at the search results and what people were looking at it over the last 10 years, it's quite interesting. In fact, there's a lot of interesting spikes in people looking at Spanish flu. So you might think that we're almost expecting something like this. But if you drill into the details and understand what's going on here, that spike in 2012, that's when Downton Abbey premiered the episode where the Spanish flu went through the Abbey and everybody was getting sick. And so obviously a very popular show. Everyone was going to the internet and trying to find out about this Spanish flu. And those other spikes you see earlier than that, and the one in 2015, that's when that episode of Downton Abbey premiered in China. So the Chinese were looking as well. So, it seems like Spanish flu interest was driven by pop culture, and these graphs very specifically end on the 31st of December, 2019. Just go forward a couple extra weeks. On the 15th of January, something apparently changed, because all of a sudden Spanish flu was getting a real spike, and no, Downton Abbey did not have a new episode that month. So what was happening? COVID is still nothing. Just a couple weeks later, COVID finally hit the grid. COVID finally jumped. We all learned what the word was. It was starting to come into the States, and it was starting to take over the conversation, or at least the search traffic. And then when you finally get to March 17th of 2020, Spanish flu was a bump on a log, and digital transformation was not even visible. And I very specifically call out this date, March 17th, 2020, because that was the day they shut down the city of Chicago, closed all the restaurants, everybody stay home. And that's when the big change happened. And was this all predictable? We all know, we lived through it. It was such a significant change in all of our operational ideas, just even the ideas on how to run a company. And how are we going to react when no one can show up to go to the office? So innovation became a big buzzword then. Innovation became the buzzword that says, well, we clearly have to think differently. And people felt almost deer in the headlights in the beginning because it was such a foundational change. But the simplest way to put it, well, actually, I got no problem with the word innovation in this case. We truly needed to understand how to be innovative to get ourselves out of this situation. So I'll be focusing on digital ways to be innovative, because a lot of stuff that came up was immediately, how do you facilitate people working from home and not being inside the office? So all this remote working stuff happened. A couple of specific stories that I went through. The one was with a professional services firm that had to equip their entire workforce. They were very used to everybody showing up and working from the office. They had to equip their entire workforce, 500 people, with laptops, and they had to have it yesterday. And next week would be just fine. But it was not truly clear if this was a long-term thing. And so, they didn't want to go off my $2,000 laptops for everybody, because it would truly, they didn't have that much cash in the bank. And so the IT team that was involved, very innovative and looking around for different opportunities or different ways to solve the problem. And they solved it with virtual PCs in the cloud, using very inexpensive Chromebooks or very inexpensive hardware to just access these cloud resources. It was a great success, and they loved talking about this. It's really fun to talk to them about how they did that. Very much were being innovative. The other company was a slightly different example. This was a company that was global, much bigger, but because they were global, they were very used to working remotely. The executives and some of the management were very used to working remotely, and everyone else had been exposed to it. So that idea wasn't that difficult. What changed was the amount of people concurrently wanting to be remote in their various locations and through the various network connection points. And so they had to work directly with the providers, the communications providers, to get bandwidth and get increases. And you don't just call somebody up and tune it up. There's a schedule involved. This is a relatively small company, but because they belong to a consortium of other companies, because they had a different way of purchasing their communication, they were able to leverage that size to get response times from the big providers a lot faster. So really, being open to different ways of working in co-opetition with working together with common other companies that aren't necessarily your competition became a great way to sort of innovate their way out of that mess. The key thing that came out for a lot of companies is you have to think differently. This is a majorly different way of thinking about how business is supposed to work. And this next story was fascinating to hear. I've got a friend in the UK, and he's with a small building products manufacturer. And this was a place that really prided themselves on their lean capabilities and their focus on quality, but it was all really focused on lean. And they had leaned out the shop and taken all these systems off the shop floor, gone visual. It really worked for their company. Their response times were high. Everything was working great. But the challenge was, how do they get to that next level of productivity? How do they maintain that productivity while all this change was happening, even on the shop floor? And it was a difficult change. I mean, it took them a long time to work it through. That idea of change, the fundamental rules of what defines good and bad or value and not value, had changed. And you just have to realize that that kind of flexibility isn't instantaneous. It can happen. You can't deny the facts and the reality, but it was a very interesting change. The other story from that time frame, last quick one, was an organization that was in the States is rolling up professional services firms. It was an architecture firm, and they're buying local architecture firms and rolling up a national presence, but they hadn't really sort of defined a standard go-to-market or a standard sort of set of infrastructures. They weren't pushing on that. They knew they had to get there, and they were starting with the video conferencing thing. Do we use vendor A, vendor B? And when COVID came, and there was always a reason to put off the decision. Somebody heard that there was a bug or a security issue, or somebody had a problem with the cost, or somebody had a problem with features and things like that. So it was very easy for everybody in the organization, all the different locations, to just kick the can down the road and do it later. But finally, when COVID hit, it was hilarious. Somebody on the team was telling me this. It was hilarious, where all of those problems seemed to melt away. And they had, within the space of a week, everybody got on board and they picked one and they jammed forward. It's this idea of focus. When your life changes and things change, you can focus and get stuff done a lot faster than you might think. I think the thing that really threw people about COVID and about this fundamental change in business when it first hit was all about how they thought about the concept of disaster recovery and business continuity. What happens in the classic disaster recovery conversation? Well, all the systems are down. Everybody's sitting in the office. The phones don't work. I can't connect with my customers, and I can't get any work done. That's the scenario that most disaster recovery projects, all disaster recovery projects, were designed to come up with alternatives. The problem was, when COVID hit, it was completely backwards. All of the systems were working perfectly. All of the processes were working perfectly, but the people couldn't get into the office to type on the screens or touch the paper or move the paper along. And they were unable to do business because they're completely unable to get any work done because they had to touch something in the office or on the shop floor. And that's where innovation kind of blasted through, and quickly learning to think differently, think creatively, but focus on the problem that had to get done. And that actually lets me get into talking about innovation. More specifically, or how do you make innovation happen? Because again, this all started. Do I have to have a significant event like COVID to make innovation happen in my organization? I actually don't think so at all. You just need to define an environment where innovation can happen effectively. To me, it's very straightforward. Everything to me is straightforward. You need these 5 different sort of attributes about the environment. If you can make these happen, you'll drive the innovation up in your company. And the first one is this idea of an environment. You have to have an environment that welcomes innovation, that allows people to install new software on their PC, or to take some time and start playing around and do something that's more of an investment project. You have to have an environment where the culture doesn't frown on that kind of stuff. But that's not enough. You can't just have an environment and magically things happen. The people have to get involved, and they have to have a certain level of curiosity. There are new ways and different ways of thinking and new tools to maybe apply. And they have to have the curiosity to want to go and invest time and think, I'm not exactly sure how this will work, but I need to learn something new. The next would be creativity. And that's a little bit of a special thing. This is, well, I can look at what I'm currently doing, or a process or whatever that's happening in my organization right now, and I can look at it in a different way. I can suspend my disbelief and think creatively and apply what I'm learning from a curiosity perspective. I can apply it to something in a different way. So creativity is another key piece of innovation. And these last two are important too. You can't just have innovation in a vacuum. There's got to be a target. There's got to be a sort of a focus. There's going to be a problem we're trying to solve, a challenge we're trying to go to. I need to generate more revenue. I need to generate more cost savings. I need to do some optimizations. There has to be a specific challenge, or else it's just time off to play with the toys. And finally, there's got to be a focus on results. There's got to be a way to say, okay, it's a skunk works. You can play for a certain amount of time, 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. But at some time, we're going to have a stage gate meeting that says, what's your charter? What do you think is happening? What are you learning? What do you assume the value is? And very specifically, is it time to start, stop, or continue? And it's okay to pause and put something on the shelf. It's not okay to sort of let an experiment dwindle over time. Let's just call it done. Log our learnings, everything good, go to the next thing. If you have an environment that makes this happen or allows this stuff to happen, now you can apply it to this digital transformation framework and do some targeting. You know, where are our challenges that we can make happen? And when you learn about or hear about different technology, this is the connection to technology. When you hear about different technologies that might or might not be applicable to your company, now you can say, well, what area am I trying to make a change in? Who has to be connected or aware? Who is going to be the owner and the decision maker in something? And how can we design something that we can do in 30, 60, 90 days and make a decision about whether or not it was a success and we're going forward, or it was a success, we just proved that was a bad idea and we're going to stop it. So there is a connection between innovation and digital transformation, and there is a way for companies to sort of make things happen proactively. There just has to be the right environment. So innovation, yeah, it's a buzzword. And now after the fact, when I think about making it through the present and making it through to the end of this, all of this lack of predictability, to me, innovation is a way to show resilience or demonstrate that we can, when things happen, we can figure out how to let the company live to see another day. Now, again, I said I'd have 5 simple ideas, and that was a dense little run I went through. So I'm going to add 2 ideas to my simple ideas list. And the first is that change happens all the time. It's not predictable. It's predictable that it will change. But if you have an innovation capability or a mindset of innovation, the impact can be managed. Can't be eliminated, but actually can be managed, and it's easier to find sort of success in the middle of failure. And then I absolutely believe that innovation can be engineered. I absolutely believe that if you make these 5 sort of elements of innovation happen inside of an organization, put some structure around it like that, but absolutely allow people to be creative, innovation can happen in any organization. So now I want to talk a little bit about the future, and here's where I get a little, well, I don't think it's that spacey, but there's think of it as almost a short-term quality or oriented thing, and a new way of thinking that I'm working on. I'd love to get feedback on, and also this idea of sustainability, the latest really big buzzword everyone's talking about. But first, I want to get back to this sort of predictable thing. You know, we made it through COVID, we made it through the supply chain shocks, and we thought we were in the clear, and then February hits, and you know, all ideas around predictability continue to get thrown out the window. No one expected this level of disruption in Europe, and no one disrupted the supply. I mean, no one expected this next level of supply chain disruption. And so absolutely, the idea of figuring out how to be resilient and figuring out how to apply new and different ways of thinking to this simple model have now become very much an imperative. So I've got a double slide here. So as I look at this, oh, now I know what I'm doing. As I look at this, and understand where the innovation can happen, I also want to start pulling in this next level conversation about how, once you get past the skunk work state, how can we start driving a level of quality? How can we apply an idea that we all understand to this new world of digital transformation, digital processes, and digital everything? And so I like to talk to folks about this idea of waste, right? That's the one thing that people see. Oh, there's a proliferation of things, and we're starting to waste a lot of money in all these new toys. So how do we deal with waste in the traditional manufacturing, traditional quality world? And the metric of choice, at least for me, is this idea of the cost of poor quality, right? If I understand I want my cost of poor quality to go to zero. That's the financial metric that I can use, or the numbers-based metric that I can use, that all of this stuff is going to represent the consequences of poor quality. And if I could drive that down, I win. So why can't I apply that same idea to digital things? So I like to talk about the cost of poor digital quality. Use that same framework, use that same idea, but apply it to your digital world. And now we can have a really interesting impact on really focusing that innovation and making it actually long-term and sustainable. So what does this look like? Well, I define cost of poor quality as these different kinds of costs, and these are costs that can be reported on. You may have elements in your GL that show this. They may be operational reports, but these are numbers that are all very manageable, that are that you know, any given business is going to swap some out because that applies and that doesn't apply to me. No problem. But what it does, it gives us a framework for figuring out corresponding cost of poor digital quality. And so prevention costs, like training people on how to use it, or appraisal costs, like putting investment in quality reviews, or auditing the software, or looking at the code and making sure it's actually doing what it's supposed to be doing. Internal and external failures. These are ideas that there are corresponding metrics in the digital world, and we can have a conversation about managing to cost of poor digital quality. And everything we do to identify these things and measure them, and over time, everything that we do in the world of quality can absolutely now be put focused on the world of digital and have that same good impact. So to me, but I will pause a sec and say, to be fair, everything I'm doing so far, everything I'm talking about so far, from cost of poor quality all the way back to what's the definition of a digital business, it's all been sort of leading up to this idea of resilience, which I like to summarize as, you know, the ability to live to see tomorrow. You know, my company is going to be able to make it through another couple of months because I'm a resilient company, whatever that means to you. But now I want to talk about a new buzzword, the latest buzzword, sustainability. Sustainability is something that there are a million different opinions on what exactly sustainability means. There are clear definitions for this, but most people don't understand them. And so what I've done is extended my little simple framework and now adding ideas around sustainability. This framework itself, I would argue, is concentrated inside the four walls. Yes, it's talking about reaching out to your customers, but that's a very transactional marketing listening type thing. So for the purposes of my conversation, I'm saying that it's focused inside the four walls. But what it does is allows us to look at all these different great ideas and bring them into my organization inside my four walls and figure out who has to be involved. Okay, it puts actions for resilience in context. And if I can put these complicated things into a simple context, then I can actually start making decisions about them. Well, I'm doing now the same thing for sustainability. So sustainability now adds another ring, and that's now looking outside of your four walls to the environment. right? Your environmental issues, like you're making and shipping all these products, or how are you impacting the world in which you are making and shipping all these products and the resources you're consuming. Or economic, there are things coming outside that say there are compliance reporting and SEC reporting and expectations around understanding your entire supply chain and the entire distribution channel out to your customer. And then finally, the community and how your organization is connecting with the community inside of which you work and live and play, and the people that are on your team live in, and your future employees live in. And that's all that sustainability covers. Now, there are any number, actually 17 specific topics that all fall under the rubric of sustainability, ranging from carbon footprint and carbon capture and life on land and pollution to sustainable cities or smart cities or industrial innovation to poverty and diversity, equity and inclusion and educational issues as well. And not all of these will apply to all companies. But when a company wants to sort of lay out, this is what sustainability means to us, typically they take a subset of these because they connect with that company's mission or they connect with that company's culture. Now, this isn't a random set of ideas or a random set of things. This is actually the list of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals that are promoted by the United Nations. The United Nations has a global thing going on, very clearly defined set of these goals and very clearly defined metrics on what success looks like as we're trying to move the needle on all these different things. And you can see different companies, many companies have adopted this framework to say, of the 17, here's the 4 things that we're focusing on, and here are the metrics that we're using to drive that, and here's our performance against those metrics. And there's any number of reasons why companies do that. It could be because they want to be perceived as a sustainable company to get included into a green fund, or they really are, it's important because they're really trying to address potential employees or current employees to make sure that they're engaged and they see that a company has a mission. It's different for every company, but this framework allows you to put these ideas in focus. What does a sustainable business mean to you? And then start developing action items. So again, the buzzword here, sustainability, and really it's about how does a company live forever, right? How does a company and the value that they create have a chance of living forever? So again, last couple of ideas to put on the list of 5 simple ideas. The first one is that resilience, very much a great thing, but it's focused on inside the 4 walls, living to see tomorrow. Sustainability, on the other hand, focused outside the 4 walls, and how does an organization thrive for the long term, the value that you've created for all those different stakeholders, how does that have long legs as well? So that's the end of my prepared remarks. I'm doing pretty good on time. Past, present, and future, a series of buzzwords that have progressed and are all still active and all still intertwined. But there are ways to use these simple ways to understand these kind of ideas so that you can then have context to apply them and have them impact your business. So again, that's all I have for the prepared slides. Here are the last I could leave it up to help jumpstart some questions, or I'll take we can flip to the panel now.
Yeah, we can flip to the panel.
Yeah.
Sorry, if you just wanted to.
We're going to bring Fred Heller on.
Yep. We did have a slide. Maybe we could put it up afterwards. If you just wanted to maybe read from it. Well, I do enjoy this. Yeah, let's bring up his slide and then I'll have you put this back up afterwards. How about that?
No worries.
Because that's a really good slide. I appreciate you getting that.
Yeah, great.
Sorry, 1 second. I will pull that up.
Yeah, I was going to just thank Jim before we go right into the panel for taking and putting something out there that's fairly simple to connect the dots. And I love the use of pictures in there. So thank you for that. And I think we're going to bring Fred Heller on. And I don't know if the two of you know each other or have worked with each other. Fred is, I don't know if the slide is coming up on Fred.
Yeah,
he is currently a data scientist and does data science and AI at Hitachi Solutions America. You can see when the slide comes up, you'll see his education. Looks like quite a bit in North Carolina. I'm very much got interested in the fact that culinary arts was in his past prior to coming into mathematics. And then you'll see a lot of his top skills really related to some of the data science and the machine learning that we've been talking about all morning. His certifications, and some of these are familiar and some of these are new to me. And then his industry experience. And then the fun fact, which I loved you sharing that, is that he loves sailing on Lake Michigan. So with that, Fred is going to lead us in a conversation with Jim and with questions that are coming in from people in the audience. So I'll turn it over to you both.
Cool.
All right, well, thank you very much. And Jim, thank you for a fabulous presentation today. And let me just start out by saying it's really a pleasure to be here, and for two reasons, really. One, I was invited by my colleague, Topher Gehrman, to join the conversation today. And also, too, because I'm also an ASQ member in Chapter 1202 in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. So absolutely a pleasure. And Jim, we do have some good questions queued up for you here.
Cool.
If possible, could we get that slide back up, Jim? I think that was.
Oh, yeah, let's get that.
The last one?
Yes, please. Yeah.
So confident.
Yeah, that was a great slide.
There we go. Perfect.
Thank you.
Yeah, so Jim, I love these five simple ideas here. Why don't we start off with a question from Karina on total quality management work in the past. There have been a lot of different buzzwords, such as employee engagement, employee involvement, employee ownership, and total employee commitment. Using all these different buzzwords means different things to different people. When someone is trying to get employees to buy into a change or a new process, what buzzword would you prefer to use and why? Could you maybe kind of help?
Sure. The one I'm most familiar with, the one I sort of converted to, on this was employee engagement. It started around 10, 12 years ago. It's popular in some companies. It sort of wanes because people get used to the format of the questions, and it's really hard to keep. If you're only going from 0 to 100, it's really hard to get that law of diminishing returns, and sometimes you have to pause it. But it's the spirit and the idea of what's behind employee engagement, not just the metric. It's like I like it. The three key ideas: does an employee buy the mission, and do they care? Do they get that feedback from their direct manager, which is actually super critical, and most direct managers don't know how to give good feedback? And do they have the tools they need to succeed, or do you make them feel like they're using grandpa's secondhand hammer type thing? I think it's simple enough. It gets you focused in the right direction, but it really makes it's the behavior that comes after that. What does it really mean to give good feedback, open and honest feedback? What does it really mean to have those sort of embarrassing, conversations? I mean, do you like it here? Are you okay? Are you frustrated? But that kind of focus typically tees up great conversations and teaches managers skills that you typically don't have. And B, at the end of the day, it's all about retention because we're in a talent war, and it's also about inclusion because it's relatively easy to hire diverse, but it's relatively difficult to retain diverse. And so inclusion is really key. So if you're driving behaviors of people and understanding and communicating better, then that's a great metric.
Cool. Thank you, Jim. And I see we have a hand up from Brian. Brian, did you?
Yeah, Fred. The that microphone issue is happening again. I know we talked about. I think it was using the wrong source.
Oh, I'm sorry. Let's see.
Hey, Jim, it's Brian. You had a slide where you had your employees, your community is kind of your mind map, that first slide for the mind map connections that you had earlier on. And I wanted to point out, so yeah, it was like about the fifth in the first 10. You had like employees, community.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Then you kind of broke it down into your mind map. So if anyone out there is on their kind of QMS journey, yeah, that right here. So we've seen this in ISO 9001 and AS 9100, anything built on ISO 9001. This is a great connection to the interested parties and the stakeholders. And, a lot of people have these sort of, they created QMS 5 or 6 years ago when ISO 9001 was first introduced interested parties. And they wrote a list of interested parties, and it just is like a paragraph in their QMS quality manual. And they never really circle back and touch it. And it's just kind of a static list. But I thought you did a really good job of, these are obviously interested parties. And then to circle back and what you applied in the next few slides where you drill down, how can I create value for owners, value for employees, and value for partners? This is a great method if anyone's starting their ISO 9001 journey or wondering how they could refresh their interested parties kind of approach.
When I first came up with this visual and stuff, the classic problem was, how do you make that connection? And it was all focused on the financial ones, but how do you make that connection between a project that's got specific focus or specific metrics on, like, say, reducing inventory, but how would you translate to something to the board? Because the board doesn't care about operational metrics. They only care about, quite literally, and I learned this with my board experience, if you reduce this to one number, it was total shareholder return. And so understanding the breakdown of TSR, that earnings capital multiple, that's straight out of Boston Consulting, right? I didn't make that up, but that is a metric that is the one metric they care about. And if you can draw a line when you're trying to get the CEO and the CIO to agree to something, if you draw a line between this is going to take down my cost of goods, well, that goes right to earnings growth, and that's a component of TSR, and now the board cares. So this is like a translation matrix to go from metrics that a project can manage to the one simple metric that the decision maker in this area cares about.
Yeah. And I think that's what the people that wrote ISO 9001, a new edition, were like, you have to, they call it the context of the organization, right? It's not just a business, but it's a business with neighbors. It's a business with suppliers, employees, so, like if you have a smokestack, the people that live within a mile of your company, like, want to know, like, what are you putting out into the air that we're breathing? And the employees, want to know that, what's the value for them? So, at some point, too, I'd really like, after you get through some questions, you and Fred have the luxury of working for a world-class organization, Hitachi, and I'm looking at your LinkedIn, and it looks like they have like a whole innovation center and process. It would be great to hear a little bit how your employer deals with that.
Did we want to take that question now, or should we move on to some of the other questions that came up and then return? Are you able to hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I can do it. I can talk Hitachi really quick. I mean, there's two ways we think about innovation. One, certainly how we apply it for our customers. And I'm not a salesperson, so I'm not going to go all sales on this, but really, when we apply these different tools that we have and capabilities, we are looking to help the customer innovate. A lot of the projects that I get involved with are things like growing the top line, not just implementing ERP or something. And so there's a big interest in that. But also inside the kind of eat our own dog food thing, we have a very active innovation team that's looking to create more IP, clearly, because more IP for us is going to be differentiating and we'll get the gig and somebody else won't. But we've got a program that provides a central place to find it, that helps identify targets, that helps find ways for folks on teams to manufacture some time to actually do some things, and then even show their things to the rest of the company. So it's a little bit grungy, a little bit dirty. It's kind of tough to do because we're focused on professional services and utilizing all our resources, but we do have a very thoughtful way of trying to drive that.
Awesome.
Does that help?
Yeah, thanks.
Sure.
Cool. Well, why don't we keep following up on the innovation and the sustainability piece with a question from Angie on how do we help drive sustainability as a necessary change and implementation going forward?
I found that to drive sustainability, you first have to go through this exercise that's on the screen, and even at a high level, just understand where the value is. I mean, I'm hearing rumbles that sustainability is going to start waning a little bit in the next year. High inflation, people are going to be cutting back. It's expense that doesn't bring value. As long as the SEC continues to promise that sustainability reporting or carbon reporting will be required for public companies in the States, then it won't lose it. But it'll be interesting to see if the economy sort of tamps it down. That said, there are a lot of non-economical or second-level economical metrics that sustainability can drive that will actually relate and fix a bigger problem. But to me, the biggest one is diversity, equity, inclusion, especially the last two, equity and inclusion. Reporting on that and finding ways to show that a company is doing that, to me, just shows that they're investing actively in people and in innovation and in longevity, because an inclusive company is going to be able to react as things change. So shorter answer is when you understand how these different elements or ideas around sustainability can tie to the value creation that your particular company cares about, then it absolutely can get legs.
Awesome. Well, I think we've asked enough questions where I feel comfortable asking my own question now.
Okay.
And this is something that's come up with a few of the clients I've worked with while we've been implementing some machine learning approaches for them. So how does an organization reimagine their customer value propositions while they're planning a digital transformation? And are these two activities complementary in any way, or do you have any advice about how we can blend them together productively?
Sure. I think they are complementary. I think they do blend well. When you look at this picture, I'm going to, we'll stick here. I'm going to do an e-commerce site for my customers, or I'm going to, sort of implement a new planning system that'll be used internally. The idea of design and understanding how these new systems are used is not just, I want to make it usable and friendly because everything has to be as easy as Amazon. It's just as much about effectiveness and impact. I mean, literally, if you make it a big pain in the butt for a customer to do business with you, you will lose them the next time somebody comes along with a better journey, a better experience. And so ideas around user experience or customer experience as they interact with the process could be by their phone. I mean, pay attention. I mean, do people want to do business on your company on the phone? Do they want to approve invoices when they're walking around the shop floor, or they want to go back in their office and key things in? understanding how people use the systems is just as important as understanding, all the rules to drive the fields on the screens and the numbers on the reports. And when we talk about customers, then my favorite piece of the conversation is known as voice of the customer. Not all companies do this, or they don't do it well, but really just go out and talk to your customers and ask them what they want, and then do that. You will print money. I've seen it. It's awesome. Yeah, it's good to go in the lab and go and come up with a new and interesting way of doing things, because it's good to get your customers to think differently every once in a while. But as long as there's an element of voice of the customer, and just listen to what they're telling you and then give it to them, they will pour money at you. It's great. I swear to goodness, it'll work.
Cool. Well, that comment certainly helps you fit in well at an ASQ conference. I'll tell you that. Wow. Thank you very much. That was super helpful.
Cool.
I believe, have we reached the end of our questions? Oh, I think we've got one more in here. How do you help guide companies away from seeking cloud and AI buzzwords alone and focus on what they actually need to do to get started with a digital transformation?
Yeah, it's back to that value thing. It's all. Have you ever heard of Simon Sinek? Sinek, and he's got this great video about the why, the how, and the what. Just go watch that video. It's the greatest. And when I first saw that, I said, that's the key. That's the key, is really understand the why. The how or the what doesn't matter. I mean, the how is understanding we have to learn about AI, but the what specifically, if it's new and different, then small bites. How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. But you got to get moving, and you can't stop. But if you understand, again, the core problem of all these things is how do you get people's time and attention, and also money. But that's literally the third thing to try to focus on. If you can get their time and attention by speaking their language and saying, we're going to attack the value that you care about. We're going to, you told me what your company's 4 objectives were for the year, and everyone's going to get paid on those 4 objectives. Well, that's what we're going to work on. And this is how we're going to drive that. It could be 2 steps away, but you got to be specific. I got to drive something they care about. Going into AI because it's cool, because I could recognize videos and things. Who cares? Help me understand why I care. And once you can help them understand why they care, then you can do the AI thing. But even then, sometimes there's a next level conversation, to be fair, that AI sounds like sci-fi, and you need to help them understand, again, taking all the complexity out, finding those right frameworks, those right analogies, so they can understand what the point is, or what the magic is. Don't tell them about your statistical models unless they're engineers. Then they might care.
That's probably pretty good advice. Let's follow this up with another question from Brian on advice for entrepreneurs trying to convince sedentary manufacturing companies to better address technology. Brian says this has been a challenge from him, and I can commiserate with that as well. Manufacturing companies come and say, hey, we'd like to do predictive maintenance on our machines. And we say, hey, do you track when these machines have broken down in the past? Yeah. And it's a big, like, deer in the headlights moment for them. So yes, how about some advice on those sedentary manufacturing companies?
Sure. So advice number 1 is pick another vertical. I'm just kidding. I've been with small, medium, and large manufacturing for about 20 years now. Before that was pharmaceuticals, and they're all the same. So don't worry about it. It's all good. The best way that I like to do it is pick a niche. And I mean a kind of manufacturing company and a kind of market, a size. I wouldn't go smaller than 50 million because they're usually just run by a couple of people that are doing it all on a shoestring. There's a sweet spot maybe between 50 and 200 million in annual turnover. And then you got to find a way to get that first example of success, because the sedentaries don't like to be pioneers. They like to see, you know, what are other people are doing and how this worked for somebody else. And now it's easy to me. It's easy to go across, you know, verticals inside of that size of manufacturing. I can go to a pump manufacturer, then I can go to a valve manufacturer. They don't compete. I can go to a medical products manufacturer, and I can go to a bolt manufacturer. I mean, it's just like quality. It's just like quality. Quality ideas apply to all sorts of different verticals, and you just need to, you know, sort of tweak it to use their language. So, you know, find a solution, keep it nichey to sort of match your size, get a success, and then sort of find a way to sort of rinse and repeat, because again, nobody likes to be a pioneer.
Sure. So kind of finding a way to understand their internal business language and find a small manageable problem that can be solved in a few weeks or a month, and you can keep that dialogue going with them.
Yeah. I've heard it said that if you go to any company and ask them, there's a magic spreadsheet or an access database or some frightening old technology that runs a super, super critical part of that company.
Yes.
And if you just automate that, A, you're a winner, and B, you can create a $100 million product out of it.
Oh, that's cool. That kind of goes in line with what we look for machine learning applications early on, is to find a small group of human beings that are doing a process very well manually, and then just figure out where the AI can automate some of their decisions for them.
Yeah, it's bites from an elephant, right? I mean, you know, when companies see results, they'll go to it. You kind of also have to understand their financials as well, and by that I mean they like the ability to, when times are tight. This is a little bit complicated. It's the conversation between capital projects and expense projects, or OpEx. They like to spend the money up front and then kind of stretch it out, just like they stretch their machines out for an extra 5 years. They like to stretch their tech out for 5 years. And but I think that it's also, and this is something that Hitachi sees all the time, that when times get tight and big change happens, that's actually an opportunity, because people need innovation. And so that'd be the other thing, is it's a timing issue. If you can have a solution that actually helps somebody get through something right now, supply chain visibility, carbon reporting up to higher levels, supply chain is the big one right now. If you can find them, you can help them solve one of the problems right now and do it in an innovative way, that you'll get in their good graces that way too. Cool. Now, bringing something wildly new that doesn't impact anything that's on fire, what's the point?
Got it. Now, maybe there's a follow-up question here about how do we get these conversations started? Should entrepreneurs approach the functional managers or go to the C-suite directly? For example, a supply chain application, do you talk to the purchasing manager, or you to go to the vice president of supply chain in the C-suite?
Well, clearly, if it's going to be a decent change or a decent investment, you're going to need to go to that decision maker. But you know, if you can get to the group manager or something like that, the way to get there through them is understand if they've got any sort of relationship. If they're kind of fighting against that person, then stop and go another direction.
Yeah.
But one way to do it is if you can make that person a success, right, and help them bring an idea that's from them into their boss or their boss's boss that's going to solve a problem, and you're the one that knows how to make the problem solved. It's you know, the conversation is not, I have someone you need to meet. The conversation should be, I got a great idea to solve a problem.
Okay.
Or I got a great idea to create value. And by the way, I'm bringing this person along because they're going to help me explain it.
Right on. Jim, you're just knocking them down here. We let me just open it up to the audience that's listening. Does anybody have another question to bring to Jim? All right.
So I thank you very much. Again, we've continued great discussion that started in our first session. And Jim and Fred, thank you. Jim, first of all, thank you for your engaging and framework, and Fred for coming into kind of add and help moderate, and to all of you that are putting questions into the chat. We really appreciate that. And we, again, like the first session, we want to keep some of these conversations going as we go on through the day and after this. I want to make sure that I remind everybody to do the survey, because there are some good raffle giveaways coming from some of our speakers. So you don't want to miss out on that opportunity. And I believe at this point, we're going to give.
I was just going to say, if maybe Jim and Fred, I guess probably Jim first, if you guys had any last comments before we ended the session.
Yeah, no, thank you. Sorry, I jumped right in.
No worries.
No last comments. I'm going to go through the chat questions and post a couple of responses to if I think of anything else. But I like this stuff. It's fun, and I think that. And I'm not a optimist. I'm certainly not a Pollyanna, but I'm definitely an optimist when it comes to, there's not only a hunger for innovation in companies and digital transformation. They just need a way to sort of see a path. And that's all I kind of want to do is help people see the path, because in the end of the day, it's going to be sustainable for them, because they're going to be able to take it. Their organization is going to be able to take it and move it forward. So I like leading with the positive. I don't like leading with technology, but it gets there pretty quickly. But I love it when people can sort of see their things in context. So if people have questions about or want to follow up afterwards and talk about any specific situations or this challenge in general, I'm happy to connect. I really love connecting with people. So drop me a line and we'll keep on the conversation going.
Great.
Awesome. Thank you.
Fred, any last comments?
Just let me say it's been wonderful to hang out with quality people this morning. Totally enjoyed it.
There's a whole network, and hope you'll keep coming back.
Sure enough.
So
Sure enough.
Sure.